This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. The time is now 11 a.m. is what I'm so used to saying every single Friday morning. But again, we are doing another episode live from the bedroom that is located center in my house, under quarantine, still under COVID-19. We have with us today Kim Hegwood, who is the owner of Hegwood Law Firm, which is here in Houston. It's not just one location, there's multiple locations across Houston. And we're going to do kind of a deep dive into some of the estate planning questions, elder care questions. And she is patiently waiting for us. So Kim, we will be, thank you for joining us this morning.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just going to take a few moments here for longtime listeners. They know we always reserve just the first few moments of kind of an update of what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast area when it comes to financial literacy. No real updates for Houston Money Week right now. We are, as you know, if you've heard the show before, we talk about going out and doing financial education workshops across the Houston, the Gulf Coast area. That essentially has been put on pause right now. We do have some of our nonprofit partners who are doing virtual workshops. And so I will keep you up to date as we get updates on that. Also, KPFT right now will be doing a silent fundraising event between May 23rd and June 5th. So that has not even rolled out yet, but I'm just letting you know. Normally we are listener sponsored, so that's how we keep the lights on. Even now, when there's only a few employees there at the radio station, it becomes more and more difficult. So you'll hear us roll that out on May 23rd. With that being said, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I'm looking forward to it.
So tell us something a little bit about yourself outside of what I've mentioned already, so listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
I tell most people that I'm a mom, and I'm probably most proud that I'm a grandma. And so I've got 8 grandkids, so I'm super excited, except for them all at one time. But I've been blessed. I got 3 great kids, and lots of grandkids, and great family. My mom is well and doing well, and so I always tell everybody that God has blessed me and really directed how my practice has gone.
8 grandkids, that's a lot. That's a handful. Well, so let's go ahead and get right into it because as an estate planning firm, and when I say that, that's not all you do. There's a big list of different stuff that you do that we'll probably touch upon here. There's elder law, probate services, Medicaid special needs, safeguarding and guardianship. When we talk about kids, all of these things are super important. We could probably do a show on each leg of this. So let's kind of start out with the COVID-19, since this has come up, how has that changed your business for you?
It's made it a little more difficult because a lot of my clients fall into the category of you shouldn't be out of the house. You should be, protecting yourself and doing all those things. We've still been open because of some of my practice areas. We've been open the whole time. My office is big enough so that everybody is kind of away from each other. They're not on top of each other, which helps. We've had clients that have had to come in and do signings and do things actually in the office. And so we've followed all the CDC, guidelines. We Clorox everything, we spray everything, we wipe everything down, and doing everything that we can to protect our clients because they're like family. So we treat them just like we would our own family, and to make sure that they're safe. We've got masks, we've got gloves, we have all those things that are necessary to protect someone that's coming into the office.
So it sounds like we were kind of talking before we went live here, and we were saying that you've been busy, you've been super busy since this has all happened, and I'm kind of in that same boat. You've got one of these businesses where people don't tend to put this on the front of their radar, and when stuff happens, that's when it bubbles up and they say, oh, I need to go do something about it. How important is estate planning for people now?
Well, estate planning is important at any time, but it's probably way more important now because of the COVID-19. Because what you're finding is that people are when they get sick, they're in the hospital. They're in the hospital for long periods of time. So having things like really good, powerful power of attorneys, someone that can handle your paying your bills and handle your finances if you're basically very sick and in the hospital for a while. You also want to have someone, like a medical power of attorney in place, someone that can make those medical decisions for you. Because if you're out of it, unconscious, on a breathing machine, you can't necessarily make those decisions. And so we want to make sure that the people that trust, and love to make those decisions are put in place and that someone knows who they are. In order for that to work, it has to be in writing, has to be signed, has to be, documented. And so our goal, always when we see clients and things, is really giving them a good education. Here's why we do these things. Those two power of attorneys prevent guardianships. Those two little tiny documents that don't cost that much at all prevent guardianships, which are very expensive, cost the family a whole lot of money. It's very traumatic when you have to do guardianship for a lot of families. And so the goal is to put some good planning in place. Have your will, have your medical power of attorney, have your statutory dual power of attorney. We do a separate HIPAA authorization so you can access medical records. And a lot of people don't realize that when they're married, although they can make medical decisions for each other, they can't access each other's medical records. And so while we put the HIPAA authorization in our medical power of attorneys, we do the separate one because your medical power of attorney only comes into play if you're incapacitated and can't make your own decisions. So the HIPAA language in there doesn't apply until you can use it. So we use the separate document. But really just putting those things in place to protect the people that you love. We tell everybody, and I've had different conversations depending on the clients, but I'm a firm believer that if you have somebody you love, you plan, because it's for them that you do it, way more so than yourself. And so the people that you love, your family.
So you just said a lot there. So and all of it is super important. You talked about a lot of these documents that people tend to procrastinate on and don't get, and now it's kind of coming to they're thinking about it. Some of the things you mentioned, like the breathing machine, that's something that, whatever your personal feelings are on that, we know with COVID-19 that people are being treated with these ventilation, with these breathing machines, and so it's becoming more of a, if you hadn't thought about it in the past, the possibility of, if you get diagnosed, of being on one of these and having not just a good intention, but whatever your opinion is on that, having it in writing. You also mentioned guardianship, which is super important. In fact, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But these are all decisions that you want to make on the front end with good planning. And that's one of the things you said, was having a good plan in place. So let me pivot a little bit and then we'll get back to this. Elder law is also kind of a topic that's really important to me, as I work with a lot of retirees, people 55 and up, either right before they turn off their paycheck and they have to make decisions about Medicare and retiree health care and that sort of thing. What can you tell people who fall into that category? What would you like to share with them?
Well, first off, we tell people that not all attorneys are the same when it comes to planning as you get older. With elder law, we like to say it's estate planning on steroids. It's just that much more that you have to do. And so you'll find that most attorneys that just have a general practice or just do kind of basic estate planning, the power of attorneys that they produce will get you by while you're younger, but they don't work when you get older. And so it's really important to have a lot of extra things in your power of attorney to allow the family to do lots of things that you need to do in order to make sure that you're protected. So we put a lot of provisions in ours that enable you to do Medicaid planning. Maybe you set up trust. Maybe you need to do lots of better planning that you hadn't done before in order to get you to where you need to be. Because in my office, as you get older, we always plan for long-term care. We always plan assuming you're going to need long-term care, because if I do that, I've got you covered. You never have to worry, and it gives you options. And we are so very much about giving clients options. We want them to be able to make decisions, have choices in their decisions, rather than be very limited in a crisis plan where you don't have options. And when you think about quality of life and the things that are really important as you age and things like that, you want to make sure you can do the best you can for a client.
So I think, that for me, the age group that I work with, if they're used to an employer-sponsored healthcare plan, and then that disappears once they retire, and these things like Medicaid or Medicare and being able to make decisions about long-term care, why is that not covered by Medicare? All of these things start to come on their radar then. And so I like the term you used, estate planning on steroids, because it's taking those things into consideration. So I do like that as well. One of the things that you guys also do is probate. And probate, when I talk with attorneys, I always find probate as the stories of why you should do estate planning, because usually attorneys have really good stories of examples where people have not done the right thing. Is there a story that maybe pops up in your head there of a client that maybe didn't prepare and that ended up making it kind of a worst case scenario for probate? Does that make sense, or can you think of anything like that?
Well, let me give you this scenario that most people are not aware of. We have a lot of people that are on second marriages, his and her kids, getting sometimes remarrying later in life. What we find is that most estate planning attorneys don't have a discussion with clients about disinheriting their children. Because when it comes to probate, the only thing that truly passes under your will is your real estate, oil and gas, mineral rights. Everything else has a beneficiary designation, and those beneficiary designations control. So when you take new spouse and make her the beneficiary, assuming that she's going to do the right thing or he's going to do the right thing down the road, it almost never works out that way. So we find that a lot of kids are in my office going, I can't believe my parents disinherited us. And I'm like, it probably wasn't intentional. They may not have gotten some good advice. And family dynamics, that may have been exactly true. And so we find that planning and really understanding your options and really knowing what's going to happen with your beneficiary designated accounts versus what's going to pass through probate. And while probate in Texas is a really simple process, as you get older, we tend to avoid probate. And we do it because of long-term care and, and potentially needing Medicaid and things like that. So we avoid it at that point in time.
So that's something to think about. There's many, every family has a different story. Blended families where there's different marriages and they're bringing different kids into the family. This can get complex. These are some of the exceptions to what people think about when they think about estate planning, and those can be very complex. Another one that we tend to leave off is people who have special needs children. For people with special needs children, that's a special situation. What would you like to share with them?
Well, first off, I encourage all parents, if you've got a child with a disability, to plan early. Set that special needs trust up. Let everybody help you put money into it over the years. Everything you can to put money aside for that child. Because what you're looking to do is enhance their quality of life. They're going to be on government benefits. They're going to be usually, if they're not with family members, they may be in a personal care home and things like that. So you want to make sure that they have a good quality of life, to the best of your ability to do that. A lot of parents, I have one of the slides in one of my workshops that says 83 and never an empty nester, because a lot of times the kids are home and they don't leave home until something happens to the parents. And so for us, we encourage parents to transition those children before they pass, so they know it's a good fit, so they know that the kids are okay, so they can watch and make sure, and so that way they've got that peace of mind knowing that my plan works. Because a lot of people don't do that. They wait, and then the parent passes away, and then the kid has lost a parent. They potentially lost the house they're living in. Their whole world is turned upside down. And so for me, I look at it as taking extra special care to make sure that we can protect those that need protection the most. And so, because when you have a disability, you don't see things the way that you would without the disability. And so it's a really good planning, taking consideration, and then making sure the people that are going to take your children are actually going to do it.
Right.
And so we caution clients all the time. If your guardians have not kept your child whether it be an adult or a minor, have not kept your children for a weekend or a week, especially with a child with a disability. If you've never kept that child and know how to take care of them, it may be a huge eye-opening, unexpected experience when all of a sudden you're thinking, you tell somebody, yes, I'll do it, thinking they're never going to pass away, and then something happens, you're like, oh my God, I can't do this.
Right.
So for us, we encourage parents to let them try it out, make sure they can do it, make sure they know, and be okay if they say no, that it's just too much, they can't handle it. Because then the parents can go on to the next person, so they know in their hearts that their children are going to be taken care of the way they want to. And I say children, I don't care if they're 50 or 60. When you're parents, when they're kids, they're their kids.
They're
So
still always our kids. It doesn't matter how old they are. So that's important. Everything that you just mentioned there, the idea of it's more than just a good, hey, I'm going to let my sister or brother have custody of my kids. The idea of making sure that they're really going to do what you expect them to do, and to have that planning beforehand to do that. There is a risk if somebody you mentioned the government benefits, and it's very expensive when you have special needs children for the cost associated with that is expensive, and one of the benefits that they get is through the government. What's the risk of not doing it correctly if you don't set up the special needs trust?
well, it takes a lot of planning, and you want to do it early and you want to do it well. And so, not setting the special needs trust up, if you don't have that in place and your child with a disability is a beneficiary, then you potentially kick them off of benefits,
Mm.
at least maybe temporarily until it can be fixed. Depending on the amount of money, depends on the fix. And there's a lot of things that you have to do. And so, a lot of these kids have been on the waiting list to get good and better benefits when they turn 18. In those, you may have to start at the bottom and work your way back up to get those benefits if you lose them. So you never want to put your child in a position of not having things in place so that you never worry about losing benefits. And two, if you plan, you can put things into what we call a third party trust. You get to decide who the beneficiaries are. If you don't plan, you end up with a first party trust, and the government gets paid back for all of their money they spent on your child. So odds are your other beneficiaries aren't going to get anything. So it's really important to make sure that you do planning so that you are in control over more of what happens and when it happens, and be able to have the direction that you truly want when it comes to your children.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you could, with a good heart, leave something behind for your kids, but if you don't do it in the correct way, it may actually knock them out of the box for a benefit that they've already been getting because of the way that you're passing those assets to them. That's super important for parents with special needs. That's a red flag for me. People need to look to pay attention to that. One of the other things that you have here, we talked about guardianship and how important that is, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that, but you also talk about something called safeguard. What's the difference? What are those things?
Well, we have what we call our child protection planning documents. And what we do is for the minor children, not only do we do permanent guardians, but we do temporary guardians, just a document that says, hey, you have the right to hang on to my child in an emergency. Because we have a lot of clients that, maybe you're in a car accident and you can't get home. And so we don't want that police officer to show up at the house and the babysitter be there and then call CPS because the babysitter doesn't have the legal right to have those children. So we put these temporary guardianship papers in place that just tells the police officer, hey, in an emergency, here who has the right to have my child. If you pass away, we find that a lot of our clients have guardians, permanent guardians that don't live close by. I have clients that have permanent guardians that live in other states. I have clients that have permanent guardians that live in other countries. So someone has to have the ability to hang on to these children until that permanent guardian arrives. And have the legal right to do things, make sure they're taken care of, emergency medical stuff, those kinds of things in an emergency. So for us, I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother. I think we go above and beyond when it comes to planning because I'm all about protecting my kids. And I look at protecting, your family just as well, because we want to make sure that we don't have those issues, that nothing can go wrong. And so I laugh and tell people I'm a reformed litigator. And so I always look at things that in such a way that, you know, if you plan for your worst case scenario, you have an excellent rock star plan, you know, and that's the way I look at it. If I plan for all the contingencies, I know that you're covered. And that gives me the peace of mind knowing you're in good shape, and it gives you the peace of mind knowing that you're in good shape as well. And that's truly important when it comes to planning, is having that peace of mind knowing I got everything taken care of and I know it's going to work.
So that is something I hadn't thought about or heard about before, and that sounds super important. I know when you put somebody on as a custodian or a guardian for your child, a lot of times it's an honor. And so, like you said, geographically, they may be located out of state, they may be located outside of the country, but I could easily see where if there's an emergency, and like you gave the example, the babysitter, and you know, that would be an opportunity for somebody to call CPS because the parent is not there. And so the idea of a temporary in case of an emergency, I think that's super important, and I had not thought about that. For listeners who are just joining us, we're talking with Kim Hegwood. She is the owner of hegwoodlaw.com, and if you'd like to find out more, you can visit the website www.hegwoodlaw.com to find out more there. Kim, we've got just a few minutes before the end of the show. What have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
Well, first, I think it's just very important to plan. So we're doing a lot of planning right now. We've pushed off some of the signings for clients that have been pretty good shape, but we've also been making arrangements for clients. We call it drive-by signing. It's just drive-by signing. So they come to the office, they stay in their cars. You know, when they're doing will packages and simple things, we can go out to the car, let them sign their documents, so they're not even in the office. It's too important to not have these things in place, that we do everything we can to protect you, get it done. And
Yeah.
so I want to make sure that your family, that your wishes, because we find that when people don't plan well, the people that may be doing the planning may not have their best interest at heart. And so I've had clients come into my office with their children talking about their inheritance. And I have to stop and tell them they don't have an inheritance. Your parents are sitting here in my office, you know, so it really, you want to make sure that the right people are making the right decisions for you.
I love that. That is so true. I hate it, but statistically, if there is financial abuse with elders, a lot of times it comes from the family. So having an advocate and looking out for them, that's huge. The idea of the drive-by signing, I like that as well. I don't know how many times I've had people come into the office and maybe they've done their will through like an online service. They printed it and they didn't even take the time to sign it or have it notarized. What's the point if you haven't gone through and done that? So the idea of you guys taking it all the way over the finish line and making sure that the documents that they have drafted, the legal documents, are complete, are huge, is a really good thing. Kim, thank you so much for being on the show today. Have a great weekend there.
You too. Thank you.